Hello, Elizabeth. How
Hello.
are you? This is Elizabeth Lee Robinson, one of my favorite people. She lives very, very close to where I grew up, where I lived in Colorado, and she and her husband, Stephen Robinson, have a company called Even Pulse. And what Even Pulse is it teaches people tactical ways to regulate their nervous system. So they do really powerful resilience training for the military, for law enforcement, for people who are really in stressful jobs, how to regulate their nervous system and perform at a high level under stress. So, welcome, my friend. So good to see you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting times right now. People are under a lot of stress, a lot of things shaking up, uh, businesses changing, not sure what's going on, what to do. And during this time, there's a lot of people who definitely are in their limbic brains.
Mhm.
So what have you been noticing first off in your line of work?
Well, as you say, you definitely can note that the stress levels are palpably higher than normal. And normal before this was already high stress levels. And part of that is how we are in constant motion. We have really probably very unrealistic expectations of ourselves as human beings and performing in our very many roles that we perform in as, partners, spouses, parents, entrepreneurs, whatever job role that we have. Some of us, as we know, train to go toward stress, first responders, law enforcement, military, nurses, doctors, etc. They train to move toward danger, toward traumatic incidences. And for those of us who don't train to do that, it it is calling on us to find better ways of how to dig deep and find out where our resilience resides and how we can build our resilience. One thing that I've definitely noted during this COVID-19 crisis is that it's an issue of immunity, our body's immunity system. And there is nothing quite like stress or fear and anxiety to compromise the immune system. So being able to regulate, you said, as self-regulate, as I always say, the brain, body, and nervous system, when we feel any kind of trigger come up, becomes more critical than ever when it comes to keeping our immunities healthy and strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what you do is help you have developed many tools for resilience, for helping people get into their bodies, get into their where they are and out of their limbic brains, which is basically our fight or flight, our reptilian brain that basically just reacts to things. And you teach
Yeah.
people to respond rather than react.
Yes, and very importantly, to create more distance between the response and the stimulus. So when the stimulus occurs, one of the things that most of us need to do, even in normal times, let alone extraordinary times, is we need to increase that space between the stimulus of what occurs and our response to it. Unless it's an emergency and you need immediate reaction, often if we can create the pause, that's when we're going to find something deeper, something more relevant to the situation. And that oftentimes too, when we are in our limbic brain and we're in the fight flight mode and sympathetically jacked up in our nervous systems, it is more challenging to create that pause. And we're going to, it's the old open mouth, insert foot kind of response to something that maybe didn't need to be as big a response as we gave it. When you talk about the limbic system response, something that's really important to understand from a brain science standpoint, there was a study done by UCLA and Dr. David Creswell many years ago, and they hooked people up to functional MRIs, and they showed people disturbing images, and as they were seeing the disturbing image, the brain lit up in the limbic system, and the amygdala immediately fired. And this is when we found out that the amygdala fires in 1.25 seconds. So when we perceive a threat, real or imagined, the amygdala fires, and that's our warning system. And what occurs is that the blood shunts away from the neocortex and goes to the limbic system. So logic and reason go offline.
I just
We're
want
no
to double check with you. How long does it take for the amygdala to fire after a stimulus?
0.25 seconds.
0.25 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so 25th of a second. And so it's very quick. And that's why sometimes we can feel like, man, I'm just like a train wreck. Like things happen inside of me faster than I can control. And we can feel out of control, in part because of our physiology. Now, one thing we can soothe ourselves with is knowing that the brain is trying to keep us alive. It's its number one job is to protect us. And so when we perceive a threat, real or imagined, the amygdala is going to fire and say, warning, warning. You see that face? That's not safe. You see that person that just walked in? That's not safe. That phone call, the bill that just came in the mail that I can't pay, all of these things that are going to trigger the stress response. Now, in the UCLA study, they asked people after they showed them the disturbing images to name the emotion that came with seeing the image. And so people would say grief, sadness, anger, whatever it was. And what happened next was extraordinary. The blood flow, first, the amygdala stopped firing when they named the emotion. Two, the blood flow went back up into the neocortex, because to name an emotion requires neocortical or upper brain function. So the blood flow redistributed, logic and reason came back online. And so that's one of the skills that we teach, is called name it and tame it. When we are triggered by an event, if we can name the emotion, if we can simply acknowledge, I feel upset, this is making me so sad, or I feel so much fear right now, it can actually help our brain function to be at a higher level when we need it the most.
Absolutely. And when we put space in between the response and the stimulus, then we can actually choose what our response is. And we were talking about reacting quickly. And in choosing our response, we begin to strengthen those pathways so that our reactions become what we want. So we're able
Yes.
to decide what sort of pathways we want to make, what sort of reaction we want to have. So that when something stressful comes in, it's not your typical, breakdown or whatever it may be, foot and mouth
Mhm.
that you said. It is actually like a calculated move. Is that I think it was, gosh, I can't remember, but my friend Keith Norris, who we had on, he closes every email with this line from some Greek mythological character of some sort. And I forget what his name is, but it says, "We don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to our training."
Mm.
And that's where training our minds, our brains, and our nervous system becomes so powerful.
Absolutely.
So I'm very interested in some of the methodology you do because you apply experts in applied resilience in how to be resilient. So what are some methods that you use to give people resilience? What tools do you give people?
Well, we say, so we teach something called the Basour Method, Baser method. And it stands for breathing, attention, simulation, energy, and recovery. And the thing we always say about Basour is that it's already happening inside of you. So when I say I'm going to teach you some skills, I'm also going to say you're already doing these skills. You are likely doing them by default and not with deliberate intent. So let's take breathing for an example, especially when we're under stress. But even when we're not under stress, when we are born, no one is there telling us how to take our first breath, right? No one's there saying, okay, little baby, now you're going to take your first breath. Go ahead. You're going to inhale in and you're going to push the air out and exhale. Congratulations. Now you know how to breathe. No, the brain and body just know how to do it. It's a natural autonomic function, right? But it is one of those functions that we can take control of. And when we take control of our breath and begin to deliberately apply our attention to breathing, when, for example, stimulus occurs, when a threat or bad news or more information about COVID and the lockdown and stay in place or work or money is coming our way, if we can deliberately go to our breath, we are now applying a resilience technique and we are helping our brain, body, and nervous system. When we are under stress and we begin to breathe with the upper third of our lungs, which is most true for most of us, the upper third of the lungs are connected to the sympathetic nervous system to fight, flight, to speed up. And here we are under pressure. We're not breathing deeply, we're breathing shallowly, and we're further putting the nervous system under pressure, further putting the brain into a, maybe I need to be on cue here. Something bad might be about to happen. I might need to fight right now. I might need to run. I might need to hide. And so when we start to bring the oxygen into the lower lobes of the lungs, which is where most of the capillaries are to distribute the oxygen anyway, most of them are down low, and we begin to breathe deeply in the bottoms of our lungs, we're now activating the parasympathetic nervous system, the slow down branch. So, as I said, you're always breathing, and most of the time, not necessarily aware of it. So, it's happening by default. But when you begin to practice deliberate intent with that, then you have a tool that is profoundly powerful. And of course, this is nothing new, right? I'm not telling you something that isn't already out there. It's not the latest, greatest thing. In fact, what we're always trying to learn is what we already deeply know and just need to remember, you know? So, all of the skills we teach are about bringing more awareness to how we are self regulating ourselves so that we become more masterful as we're interacting with one another. And that's key right now because even though we're practicing social distancing, I'm actually seeing that more of us are connecting at even deeper levels, talking more openly about our fears, which is going to help us to be more capable of dealing with them. It's when we hide them and we don't reveal them that, we really suffer. So that vulnerability is our ultimate strength, you know?
Beautiful. So,
Yeah.
all right, the first tool is breathing. We all
Yeah.
know how to do it, but I love that going deep into our lungs. Taking the deep breath. And what I'll often do is expand my capacity. So even
Mm.
where I'm at a place where it's like I can't breathe anymore, a little bit more in,
Yeah.
see how much more I can get in there, because exactly, it's hitting that the lower puppy's got something to say, hitting the lower lobes of the lungs and reminding us that we're safe.
Mhm.
Um, Another tool is actually exhaling with a sigh, with like audibly. I'm
Mhm.
told that exhaling audibly actually lets us know that we're in a safe place.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And extending the exhale. I mean, a lot of times when you're seeking for patience, when you're seeking for kindness, when you're seeking for strength, for whatever is coming your way in the moment, that inhalation with an extended exhale. And what does that say? It says, I can let go. I'm not just going to hold on, because the shallow breath is about holding and being contracted. And when we can extend the exhale, we are cueing ourselves on multiple levels that we can let go, that we don't have to hang on quite so tightly. And that's it. I mean, that also helps with the thoughts that are whirling through our minds. This is why meditation is so profound and powerful, right? Because it's combining this exquisite attention of breath and attentional awareness with mind. um, and this is where what we're doing right now with our thoughts is so important. Thought field, uh, science, and how we create our reality through the power of thought is something that we are just beginning to really understand is at the crux of all creation. So when we're at this time with COVID-19 of creating and potentially an entirely new world, I had some moments and days of fears really niggling inside of me of what's going to happen. How is this going to shake out? Fears just about all kinds of things outside of myself, with our government, our country, the world, those who are truly suffering through this. And the neurologist, I just want to add in here, that we worked with for over a decade now, he defines trauma as any time we're helpless to respond.
Right.
So we think of traumas as, the big ones, the catastrophes, the, tsunamis and earthquakes and war and incest and rape. And, but when you think of watching television or news and seeing what's happening halfway across the world or halfway across the country, and feeling that there's nothing you can do to help, that can create a traumatization in and of itself that's more subtle. Um, and at any rate, I began to really deeply go within and starting to look for silver linings. This is attentional control. What am I placing my attention on? And as I focused on the scary parts of this, of course, I felt more fear. And I know very well what fear does to the immune system. And I'm sure everyone listening knows what fear and anxiety and stress do to the immune system. And I'm like, well, that would be the antithesis of what we want to create here. So I started to listen to people that I've been online with and been coaching. And when we're doing our live trainings now online, and asking people about the silver linings. What are the silver linings you're finding right now? And there have been so many silver linings. Yesterday on LinkedIn, I saw that the green gas emissions on Earth have dropped dramatically, since we've been still and staying in place. And I'm sure everybody saw the rivers in Venice running clean, clear blue water with fish swimming through them, which hasn't happened in God knows how many years. And I feel, as a woman who would give birth, we need to be quiet as we're growing that child. And this is a new world and a new child that we're going to birth in this place. And so practicing the self-care and the self-love and bringing pleasure into our lives at this time, even with all the chaos, finding that we can count the many blessings that we have if we're not sick and we have food on our table, finding ways to be of service to those who don't, are all going to be things that bring us into a place of parenting this new world, which I believe we're all doing.
Love that. Yeah, absolutely. Finding the silver linings is one of the most beautiful things that I've found as well. It's like, and that's what I call perspective. Choosing the perspective we place our attention on makes a huge difference. And we're talking about, the power of our thoughts, which is the attention piece of Basour. And our attention, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, attention is the currency of our neurology. We even use it in language, right? Pay attention.
Right.
And it's the currency of our neurology, because those thoughts, those pathways we give our attention to, they grow, they get stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's the currency of our neurology, it's kind of the currency of everything.
Yeah.
So, attention, choosing what perspective to be giving your attention to, whether it
Mm-hmm.
be, you know, uh, disaster TV or or ways to empower yourself,
Mm-hmm.
which is the entire point of this series. So the next on the list is simulation. Tell me about that.
Well, if you think back to the UCLA study I mentioned, this is when science really began to understand that we don't easily distinguish the difference between what is real and what is imagined in our minds. And the brain responds. Like if I close my eyes and think about my mother, the same places in my brain are going to light up as if my mother walked in the room and was standing in front of me. So I can imagine her, or she can really be in front of me. And the same parts of the brain are responding. And so what we imagine is as powerful as what is real. And because that's a very soft concept to get our hands around and to try and, hang a hat on, um, it can be poo-pooed. People think, well, it doesn't really matter what I think about. And, if I'm a worryaholic or a negaholic, come on, what is that really going to do to my life? And in fact, we're beginning to understand, and I think shamans of old and the spiritual teachers of old have always known this. Science is catching up. But we are simulators through and through. When we're dreaming at night, when we are waking, we're in the waking dream during the day. We simulate our entire lives, and our lives are the outpicturing of what we simulate, what we imagine, and what we pay into, as you said, with our currency. And so the power of being, of knowing, for example, that I'm simulating a negative outcome, like, thinking about what's going to happen with the financial economy or entrepreneurism or people in their jobs are, if we spend our time simulating that worst outcome, we are feeding and fueling that potential. And so taking the time, and this all ties in, all of Basour ties into heart rate variability and looking at how our heart rhythm is responding to our thoughts and our emotions, how our physiology in total is responding to our thoughts and emotions, muscle tension, gut health, the contraction of not only the heart muscle, but also the vagus nerve and keeping the vagus nerve turned on. I mean, I can't express enough about, if people don't know about the vagus nerve, this is the 10th of the cranial nerves, and it runs from the gut through the lungs and the heart, the voice box, and into the face. And when we are under threat, that nerve actually like shuts off, and our gut turns off. We stop digesting food. We get really prepared for fight flight, and it can happen in a split second with the trigger, the stimulus we were talking about. And one of the ways in which we can turn that on, and we can do this even through the power of simulation, is imagining a beatific, loving face smiling back at us. You know, for people who are religious, they might see an image of Christ or Mother Mary come to them and be in front of them. And that simulation will change their physiology. Being an appreciation, being inside of what is it that is here, that is now, that I can appreciate. And it's not enough to just think it. One must feel it for it to have the hormonal and biological impacts that we're looking for. So as I say, we're simulating everything. I mean, I'm simulating, what am I going to do tonight? And,
Right.
you know, oh, we're going to do that. Okay, yeah, that's got to be next. And we're always a little ahead of ourselves. And, but you know, I've just come to believe that is one of the key drivers of how I am creating the world that I live in, and my own body, my own life, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. We we are. We're always simulating something, you know. There's arguments that this entire life is a simulation, even, right? It's
Yeah.
all in our heads. We're creating it all. And the bottom line with that is what we simulate, our minds don't know the difference. Our nervous system doesn't know the difference. So we can get really upset about something that isn't actually knocking on our door. You know, we can get upset about, we can be extremely fearful about COVID-19, for example, and it's not near us, you know, and we can be really upset and worried about things that are not directly threatening us. And this is where dropping in, breathing, taking a look at where you are and that you're safe, bringing your attention to yourself, simulating what you want to happen. And do you also find it useful to simulate the worst case scenario?
You know, I do believe that there is some wisdom in being prepared for the worst, you know, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. I remember that saying from a long, long time ago. So we practice, you know, having enough food in the house for at least a month, something like that. Um, and it was interesting because when this struck, and I had these moments where I was feeling like I've been preparing for this. Like it was surprising to me how actually calm I felt. Um, and when I've gone down to town, I've taken a very deep commitment to practicing connecting with people, even though we're still standing 6 feet apart or whatever.
Mhm.
And one way we can connect is through eye contact. Eye contact right now is vital. It's absolutely vital for the survival of our species, that we continue to look one another in the eyes and hold each other's gaze and not be afraid to look at one another. I mean, it's so important. And I'm seeing it at the grocery store, and I went to the hardware store the other day, and I would really like lean into someone and say, thank you. I appreciate you helping me find this, or whatever it was, so that I could connect. And the other thing too about the vagus is, if if I'm turned on inside of myself, if my vagus nerve is turned on, and this is all about polyvagal theory. For anybody who wants to research a little bit about polyvagal theory, this is what I'm talking about. When I'm turned on, I can help you turn on, meaning hook up inside yourself, hook up inside your heart, inside your lungs, inside your gut. And in fact, we're beginning to understand. And I think shaman, the other thing too about the vagus is if I, hello.
Something crazy just happened.
Well, it's about the Vegas.
Let's
Yeah.
bring it back. Let's bring it back.
Yeah. And you know, because it is it's called the Vegas because it's the wandering nerve. So it's vagabond. Vegas is vagabond. So Stephen and I like to say what happens in the Vegas doesn't stay in the Vegas. Um, but it is a way when we connect and look at each other in the eye, and you can see that I'm safe and I can see that you're safe. It helps to connect us throughout our whole bodies. And that connection right now is supreme for getting through times when there's a lot of chaos and a lot of fear. So we can practice that with our children, with our spouses, with our friends through, you know, digital platforms where people are having a lot of Zoom happy hours and things like that. And that's a great way to connect, you know.
And this is what's tricky about, technology is amazing. It's given us all this opportunity to connect with each other, even though we're not near each other, right? Um, but the other thing is the eye contact. Absolutely true and so powerful. And I've noticed, just being out in the world, I've noticed people avoiding eye contact.
Yeah, right.
And I want to thank you so much for saying what you said, because that's like a nutrient for us. And the technology is amazing, but the camera's up here and your eyes are down here
Yeah, I
from
know.
where I'm seeing. So like it's a tricky thing. It's not real eye contact yet.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
when we do see each other, absolutely, eye
yeah,
contact is a huge piece.
yeah, yeah. And it helps us to pause, and it helps us to feel like our human selves, you know, and that's an important thing right now in the kind of world we're living in and the situation that we're going through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, so we're on energy now.
Yeah.
And by the way, I wanna just pause for a second, and all of this is backed up by science also, right? Tell me how you've tested this.
Well, so Basour and what we do in training is it's kind of like an awareness, knowledge, action theme. We create, the first thing we do is create awareness of what it is that we need for building applied resilience in our lives. And next, we provide a knowledge base, which is the neurophysiology of stress. So we teach a lot about how the brain, body, nervous system respond to stress as a foundation of knowledge. And I know when I first received that information, light bulbs were going on, and I felt like my life flashed in front of my eyes. And I felt like, oh, now I understand why I behaved the way I did when X, Y, and Z happened. Now I know why I was that way. And it was a part of my physiology, not some kind of faulty, broken part of me. Because sometimes when we misbehave or respond poorly to a situation, it is truly a part of our physiology that was trying to help us. And I had a lot more compassion for myself, and I see that happen with our clients as well. Anyway, so what happened was we were funded by the Department of Defense to train 6,000 US soldiers who were deploying to Iraq and Afghanistan at the starts of the Iraq-Afghanistan wars, and what it was, 8, 9, 9, 10 in that time frame. And the gentleman that funded said, I want to also have it researched, because if it does what you say you think it can do, we should have it researched. And so he funded both the training for the 6,000 troops, as well as an organization named Samueli Institute and the Rand Corporation to do the qualitative and quantitative analysis. The research was 850 pages long. We ended up with after like 3 years time, with a 52-page executive summary, which we said, could we get a 5-page executive summary out of that so people will actually read it? And what it showed was that it reduced anxiety in the participants. It reduced the markers for PTSD. It improved team cohesion. It improved communication, self-efficacy. So it had, really tremendous markers. And this was pre-training assessment, post-training assessment. They did a survey 6 months into the deployment, because the 6,000 that we got were just getting ready to go on a 15-month deployment. And over 70% of the participants used one or more of the skills on a daily basis during that deployment. And that was after 1 4-hour block of instruction. So we were very proud of that. The stick rate was very high. And in fact, we even had soldiers calling us 5 years later, 7 years later, finding us on the internet and saying, you guys, that saved my life. Like that, the materials that you gave us and the what you gave us to go down range with was, it's hard to toot one's own horn, but from what people have said, it was life transformative at a time that mattered the most. Mm-hmm. So yes, it is backed by science, and you can read about that on our research page at evenpulse.com if you want to learn more.
Absolutely. And I bring that up because the next aspect of Basour is energy. Yeah. And many people are like, energy, that's woo-woo stuff.
Right.
Tell me about energy.
Well, energy, we sometimes say it's our euphemism for emotion, because you've probably all heard the phrase, we are energy in motion, right? And that is emotion. And Basour is really a euphemism for mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. But energy is the fuel of what keeps us going, right? It's also what animates our spirits. It's what if we wake up in the morning and we don't have it, we know it, and it is something that we need to modulate and regulate. We all know when we feel a little bit manic and a little bit crazed, or when we feel a little bit flat and a little bit depressive, or sometimes vacillating between the two, especially in our culture. But energy is something that is also a part of our heart rate variability and how we are regulating the energy inside of our bodies as we are experiencing the events of our lives. So, when we have an elderly parent who's not well, and we are caring for them for months at a time, we can feel what that does to our energy. If you've ever been in the presence of someone who's died, it can actually be this incredible expansion of energy. We know we're in the presence of something sacred, the same as when we're in the room when a baby is born. These moments of time, we can really feel our energy if we're tuned to it. And this is where, we want to practice what it is that regulates the energy control. And the thing about Basour, the breathing, attention, simulation, energy, it's all happening simultaneously all the time. We have to stovepipe it to teach it. We teach it in a circle, but it is all happening simultaneously. So I regulate my energy through the use of my breath and my thoughts and how I'm simulating an outcome. Um, and I have to care for my energy. I have to care for the the expenditure of my energy. And if I'm giving too much with my body, if I'm giving too much and I'm draining myself and not refueling my tank, this is something to be really acutely aware of. I mean, it's hard for parents, you know, especially with little ones. That's one of the things that they'll feel, you know, after the first 3 years, they're just like, you know, oh my gosh. And you know, that's an extraordinary period of time. Same with a deployment for military personnel. That these are extraordinary periods of time, and it takes a long time to re-regulate the energy afterwards. But there are practices and skills. You know, we use heart rate variability a lot in our training, because HRV is an indicator of our overall health and well-being and our energy levels. Um, you know, I would encourage listeners to learn more about HRV, to try an HRV app. Heart Math is a good institute. Elite HRV is a good institute. We use both of them. And once you really see poor HRV, which is exemplified through the feeling of like frustration or anger or fear, even if you never saw a screen and what incoherent HRV looks like, you just know what it is through those emotions, through energy, anger or fear, as I said. And smooth HRV would be what you would feel when you are in a state of appreciation, when you're in a deep state of prayer or meditation, when you're deeply listening to someone and being present for someone else and giving, all of those things.
I don't remember if it was you or Steven or maybe it was somebody else who gave me just such a great explanation of what HRV is, um, which was essentially that our body, our heart is always responding to what's happening in our environment, in ourselves, in our constantly changing physiology. And that response, if it's more responsive, we're going to see that in our HRV, which is heart rate variability. It's tiny little variability in our heart rate.
Mm-hmm.
And so when our body's really in tuned and listening to itself, and our heart is listening to itself and responding effectively, the little micro changes in our heart rate. And we can see that show up in our HRV. And that basically means that we are we are in our bodies. We are, responding to ourselves, which is super powerful as opposed to reacting to whatever's going on outside. And we don't have, our bodies are really good at giving the resources to what need them. So when we're in a sympathetic state or a fight or flight state, all of our blood goes to our extremities. It goes away from our organs, right? Because we don't need to worry about digesting lunch when we have a bear chasing us. We need to run away from the bear. So when we are in a place where we can digest our food and feel what's going on in our physiology, then we have this cool little marker to show that. And that's what HRV is.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. And you know, one thing that when I was first learning about HRV, and I'm by no means an expert, I, you know, we think of heart rate, right? Everybody's like checking their Fitbit to see what their heart rate is. And your heart rate is the average between the inhale and the exhale. So if everybody inhales right now, let's just say that raised our heart rate to 74, and then we exhale, and that reduced our heart rate to 54. And our average heart rate is 64. I'm just making these numbers up, right? But heart rate variability is not the heart rate, which is the average between the inhalation and the exhalation. It is the beat to beat interval between the rhythms. And you're absolutely right. Every event, every thought, doesn't even have to be an event. The heart will respond. So, like if we have a fearful thought, our heart rate is going to go up. Our heart rate variability will become incoherent, which just means that it becomes a jagged line and the ratio is shorter. When we're in coherence, that it's a smooth sine wave, and we have this distance, right, between the top and the bottom of the sine wave. And once you see that on the screen, what I always say to people, because we'll do this live with people in our training and get them to come up on HRV and coach them into smooth HRV through breathing skills and through appreciation skills, through the skill and power of appreciation. I always say it's a superhero power when we can be in appreciation. And at any rate, I'll say to that person, you now know what this feels like to have coherence. And you know what it looks like on the screen. And so now you just have to access this feeling state again to get to that place, They also say in the HeartMath research says that we influence each other's HRV within about a 10-foot radius of each other. So if my HRV is smooth and coherent and strong, I can influence yours to become the same way. The same is true in reverse, that if somebody walks in the room and they're, dysregulated and upset and emoting, everyone's HRV will become discordant and dysregulated unless we're strong enough. And that's what applied resilience is. We can choose our physiological, emotional state and apply it, choose it.
So good. So
Yeah.
good. Yeah, it's exactly right. Like somebody walks in the room and you feel the tension, like
Mhm.
to help people understand their energy, I say, when you walk into a room where some people have been fighting and they're like playing it off like everything's okay, but you can feel the tension in the room. Like you cut that stuff with a knife, like it's
Yeah.
thick. And that's part of our energy. And I love what you said about how our HRV affects the HRV of the people around us,
Mhm.
which is absolutely the case. And we all know, we feel that, you go around somebody who's super stressed, you're going to feel a little stressed, and you're hanging out with somebody who's just super chill.
Mhm.
You can exhale, you can relax a little bit, and it feels,
Get in the
you
face.
feel that it's in the face. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah.
Just seeing a face smile, like we mirror that, you know? We are each other's mirrors. It's amazing how that is and how science is backing that up in so many different ways.
Yes. Yeah. They
All
say
right.
that the research shows that the first cortisol dump for a baby, for an infant, is the first time that the infant sees the mother frown at the child, and that's often the first cortisol dump. Yeah,
Wow.
because they know that, oh, something's not right.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah,
That's super interesting. All right. So we talked about breathing, attention. We talked about
simulation.
simulation, yes, energy, and
Yeah.
now R.
So R is recovery. And as we were creating our training model 17 years ago, I continued to say to Stephen, because he came from the performance side of the house. His background was all not only about sports physiology and coaching and performance. He was an elite athlete, but he also did a lot of work with special forces and training people and interviewing special forces soldiers on what it was that made them resilient. And essentially, performance, I noticed, just gets all the attention. All the, it's the sexy part, my awards, what I did, how I was recognized. When I go to the gym and I lift weights and I build that bicep and then I put on my nice short t-shirt so you can see that gun sticking out, that's all the sexy part of it, right? And that's what we tend to appreciate and value in the culture. The issue is really that we lack value in recovery. And without recovery, performance is a diminishing return. We will burn out. We will lose our ability to ultimately do well at what we do. And without valuing recovery, which we haven't done for decades and decades and decades and decades, we are now moving into a period where we are beginning to value it. Science is telling us we must sleep. We were treating that like, I'll sleep when I'm dead, or, and that's often a very common in the military. We undervalue sleep. It's a weakness, to have to recover and rest. So the issue becomes about reprioritizing what we value and understand about the recovery process. So sleep, hydration, nutrition, but also pleasure and the things that give us, the simple things in life, which we also have stopped valuing in many ways writ large. And I'm going to get a little woo woo on the audience here, but to me, this is the feminine. And I don't mean female versus male. But I'm talking the aspects of masculine and feminine within each one of us. To perform is a masculine quality. It is the spark of creation. It's how I show up and make impact and get shit done, right? And to nurture and be quiet and go within and be intuitive and close my eyes and rest is to be the feminine part inside of me. Each one of us, no matter what our sex or gender, have those qualities. And this is, to me, I feel like it's the key to our evolution right now, is the balance of the masculine and the feminine, the balance of performance and recovery. And to me, performance and recovery in balance is what applied resilience is all about.
Yes, beautiful. That's
Yeah.
something we've been talking about quite a bit also with Dr. David Rosenthal. He was talking about a part of his systems is like sleep 8 to 10 hours. And there's a video watch of Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's like, some people are telling me you need sleep, that they need more sleep than 6 hours. 'Cause he's like, 6 hours, that's all the sleep you need. And he's like, sleep faster. That's
Sleep.
Schwarzenegger's answer to that.
So he
Sleep
probably said,
faster.
sleep faster.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So I love that. And right now we really get a chance to go to recover deeply. And I also really appreciate how you said that masculine and feminine is not like male female. Like we have masculine and feminine, all of us, just where we've how it's being labeled in this context. And the fact is we can't perform near as well if we don't recover. That's where it all comes from, the parasympathetic, the rest and digest. That's where you think of it, fight or flight, that's taking energy from us, right? To fight or to run, we need energy. To rest and digest, we are gaining energy.
Mm-hmm.
And both of those absolutely need to be in balance. So I
Yeah.
love that she said that.
Well, going to the gym and working out and, building the bicep example, it isn't when we're lifting weights that we're building the muscle. That's when we're tearing the muscle down. It's when we sleep at night that the muscle actually grows and the sexy part happens, if you will. You know, I say that because I make fun of all the guys we work with in the military, and you know they work out a lot and then they wear extra small t-shirts.
Right.
Anyway, yeah, so the recovery piece is absolutely vital. Heretofore it has been undervalued in the society, and I really do see that we're making a great shift now. And this is another silver lining of COVID-19, is that people are in this recovery mode. They are the staying at home, the time not driving on the freeway, all of those things are having a big impact on people's ability to feel more human again. And I'm encouraging our clients to really practice news hygiene, news fasting, and just make sure that you're not taking too much of that in, because it really does trigger the fight, flight, and the fear and the what ifs. And, you know, so do something about, you know, what's in your locus of control, and take charge in the environment in which you can actually do something about.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Awesome. Thank you so much. Where can people learn more about you and Even Pulse?
So our website is evenpulse.com. That's EVENPULSE.com. We have a Facebook presence on Resilience Mastery and Resilience Even Pulse Tactical. So Even Pulse Resilience Mastery and Even Pulse Tactical, you can follow us there. And, you know, of course, we're on LinkedIn and posting videos and working to get to be better social creatures online.
Unreal. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It's awesome to connect with you again. I love, like, you guys are just moving in to your new place right now, so that's really exciting.
Yeah.
And yeah, just always such a pleasure. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Kevin. I love what you do, and just love that you're just rocking the world with your transformative life experience and helping so many people out. So thank you for including me on your beautiful ride.
My pleasure. Talk soon.
Okay, bye bye.